On May 4, 1945, at 1,432 hours, off the Scottish coast, 180 kilometers into the North Atlantic, Kapitänleutnant Adalbert Schnee of U-2511 raised his periscope for a brief 3 seconds. Through the optics, he observed the HMS Norfolk, a British heavy cruiser of 10,000 tons, armed with 8 8-inch guns. Surrounding her were 4 destroyer escorts, spread out in a defensive screen. Schnee quickly lowered the periscope. His torpedo officer stood ready at the firing panel, 6 G70 electric torpedoes loaded and armed, with firing solution calculated and locked in. It was a perfect attack position. Schnee had done this 21 times before. 21 ships had been sent to the bottom over 12 combat patrols, amounting to 193,000 tons of Allied shipping destroyed. His award of the Knight's Cross with oak leaves placed him among the elite, one of only 160 U-boat commanders to receive Germany's highest military decoration. He knew the sequence, approach, calculation, the precise moment to give the command, and how 6 torpedoes would leave their tubes at 3-second intervals, followed by 90 seconds of silence, the deafening explosions, and the secondary detonations as boilers ruptured and the hull split apart. Schnee had survived 4 years in the Atlantic War, facing destroyer screens far heavier than this one. He had attacked convoy escorts at closer ranges and had survived depth charge patterns that should have crushed his submarine. But this patrol felt different. At 1,432 hours, Schnee's hand rested on the firing lever, his crew waiting for the command. The HMS Norfolk continued on its course, unaware of the looming danger. The destroyer escorts showed no reaction, their sonar sweeps passing over U-2511 without detecting it. In that moment, Schnee possessed something no U-boat commander had before, absolute tactical superiority. In January 1943, Admiral Karl Donitz studied casualty reports in his Berlin headquarters. December had been devastating, with 43 U-boats lost. November, 41. October, 38. The numbers were grim, showing that Germany was losing U-boats faster than they could be replaced. The Type XXI submarine, the backbone of the U-boat fleet, had become obsolete. Allied radar could detect it on the surface, sonar could track it submerged, and depth charges could destroy it at almost any depth. The limitations of the Type XXI were fatal. Maximum submerged speed of 8 knots, a diving depth of 220 meters, and a torpedo reload time of 20 minutes. Against Allied destroyer escorts with radar-guided depth charges and speeds of 25 knots, the Type XXI had no escape once detected. Donitz needed a new type of submarine, not just an improved version, but a revolutionary design that could make Allied anti-submarine tactics obsolete. In February 1943, Donitz gathered Germany's top naval engineers at the Marine Design Bureau. The requirements were clear. Submerged speed of at least 15 knots to outrun destroyer escorts, a diving depth of at least 280 meters to avoid Allied depth charges, the ability to carry a minimum of 20 torpedoes with rapid reload capabilities, and a design that minimized radar and sonar signatures. The engineers came up with a design that seemed almost impossible, the Type XXI Elektroboot. The hull was completely redesigned with a streamlined teardrop shape, optimized for underwater speed rather than surface travel. The conning tower was minimized, and every external fitting was recessed or eliminated. The result was a submarine that created 75% less drag than the Type XXI. The power system was revolutionary, 3 times the battery capacity of the Type XXI, with new, high-efficiency electric motors. The torpedo system was automated with hydraulic loading mechanisms that could reload all 6 torpedo tubes in just 12 minutes, compared to the Type XXI's 20 minutes for manual reloading. Detection countermeasures included rubber coating on the hull to absorb sonar pings, making the submarine much harder to detect. By April 1945, Germany had built 118 Type XXI submarines, but only 4 were operational before the war ended. The remaining 114 were incomplete, either still under construction or lacking trained crews or fuel for patrols. However, one Type XXI submarine, U-2511, commanded by Adalbert Schnee, would demonstrate what might have been. On the morning of May 4, 1945, U-2511 was submerged and traveling at 12 knots, 180 kilometers off the Scottish coast. Schnee had been at sea for 4 days, but the patrol had been uneventful. No contacts, no attacks, No signs that the war was nearing its end. At 1,347 hours, the hydrophone operator detected propeller noise at bearing 270 degrees, multiple contacts, warships, not merchant vessels. Schnee changed course to intercept. Thanks to the Type XXI silent running capabilities, he could approach at 5.5 knots without detection by Allied sonar. The hull's streamlined shape minimized water disturbance, and the rubber coating absorbed sonar pings. At 1,450 hours, Schnee raised the periscope for a quick glance, 30 seconds at most, standard procedure to avoid detection. What he saw made him hesitate. The HMS Norfolk, a heavy cruiser of 10,000 tons, accompanied by 4 destroyers, was zigzagging, a standard anti-submarine maneuver. But the pattern was predictable. The destroyers were spread out, guarding the outer perimeter. Schnee lowered the periscope. In a Type XXI submarine, this would have been suicide. A heavy cruiser with 4 destroyer escorts meant overwhelming depth charge capacity. If detected, U-2511 would face attacks from 5 warships at once. But the Type XXI was different. U-2511, however, was not a Type 7 submarine. Schnee ordered silent running, increasing speed to 8 knots. The electric motors hummed softly as the submarine closed the distance. No cavitation noise, no sign of detection. The Allied escort group continued on its course, unaware of the impending threat. At 1,428 hours, Schnee raised the periscope once again. The HMS Norfolk now filled his view 800 meters away. The cruiser's profile was perfect, offering a broadside angle, and her zigzag course meant she would sail directly into the spread of torpedoes in the next 2 minutes. Schnee called out the firing solution, and the torpedo officer calculated the intercept angles. 6 G7E electric torpedoes were loaded, weightless and undetectable. At 800 meters, the time to impact would be 90 seconds. Norfolk's speed and course ensured it would sail straight into the spread. Schnee made his approach. 1,430 hours, 700 meters. 1,431 hours, 600 meters. The destroyers showed no sign of reaction. Their sonar sweeps passed over U-2511 without detecting it. The Type XXI's design, its streamlined hull, rubber coating, and silent electric drive, rendered it invisible. At 1,432 hours, U-2511 was just 500 yards away, point-blank range for a submarine. Schnee could see the crew on the Norfolk's deck, count the destroyer escorts, and hear the propellers of the destroyers through the hull, the rhythmic sound of heavy warship screws churning the water. He moved his hand to the firing lever. The torpedo officer stood by. The firing solution was locked, and the tubes were armed. The HMS Norfolk held steady on course, and Schnee had the perfect broadside angle, just 500 yards away. In 12 years of submarine warfare, no U-boat commander had ever held such position, undetected and at point-blank range against a heavy cruiser with a full escort screen. The Type XXI had given Schnee exactly what Admiral Donitz had promised, absolute tactical superiority. As his finger hovered over the firing lever, Schnee remembered something. Earlier that morning, at 11:20 hours, U-2511's radio operator had received a transmission, a coded message from U-boat command. Schnee had been in his cabin, reviewing patrol logs, when the radio operator knocked and handed him the decrypted message. It was brief: cease all offensive operations. Effective immediately. Await further orders. Donitz. Schnee had read it twice. Cease all offensive operations. No context, no explanation, just an order. He'd filed it away and continued the patrol. The war wasn't over. No armistice had been announced, no surrender declared. Until he received confirmation otherwise, he was still on active combat duty. But now, with HMS Norfolk just 500 yards away, 6 torpedoes ready to fire, the message took on a new significance. Schnee's hand remained on the firing lever. The crew waited in silence. They were all familiar with the sequence, the firing of tubes, the dive, the escape. Schnee knew that, once the torpedoes were fired, the destroyers would converge on the launch point. But U-2511 would already be 2 kilometers away, running deep and fast, beyond the range of their depth charges. The opportunity to sink HMS Norfolk was within his grasp. He could add another heavy cruiser to his list of kills, return to Bergen with confirmation that the Type 21 had worked as intended, proving Germany had built the submarine that could win the Battle of the Atlantic. Or he could follow the order, cease offensive operations, and let Norfolk sail by unharmed, proving nothing. 30 seconds passed. The cruiser continued on its course, and the destroyers maintained a patrol pattern. U-2511 remained undetected at 500 yards. With a quiet motion, Schnee released a firing lever. "Secure from battle stations," he said softly. "Break contact. Come to course 045. Depth 100 meters. Speed 5 knots. The torpedo officers stared at him. The crew hesitated. They were in the perfect attack position. They had the shot. "Execute," Schnee said firmly. U-2511 turned away, the electric motors humming softly. The submarine descended to 100 meters. HMS Norfolk continued on its course, unaware that it had been moments from destruction. At 1,435 hours, Schnee raised the periscope one final time. The cruiser was now 1,200 yards away and pulling ahead, the destroyer escort showing no reaction. They had never detected U-2511. They had never known they were under attack. Schnee lowered the periscope and returned to his cabin, pulling out the message from 11:20 hours. Cease all offensive operations. He had followed the order, but in doing so, he had proven something else. The next morning, May 5th, 1945, at 0800 hours, U-2511 surfaced 200 kilometers west of Bergen. Schnee raised a radio antenna and transmitted a contact report to U-Boat Command. Encountered HMS Norfolk and escort group. Type 21 performance confirmed. Undetected approach to 500 yards. Broke contact per orders of 1,120 hours for May. The response came within the hour. Return to Bergen immediately. Surrender protocols to follow. Done it. Schnee read the message aloud to his crew. There was silence in the control room. 4 years of war. 12 combat patrols. 21 ships sunk. And now, surrender. The war was already ending. Dönitz had known. The ceasefire order at 11:20 hours wasn't tactical. It was political. Germany was negotiating surrender terms, and an attack on the HMS Norfolk would have violated those negotiations. It would have been a war crime, an attack after hostilities had effectively ceased. Schnee had followed the order without knowing why, and in doing so, he had avoided becoming the U-boat commander who sank a British cruiser during peace negotiations. On May 8, 1945, at 2,301 hours, Germany surrendered unconditionally, and the war in Europe ended. On May 9, 1945, U-2511 entered Bergen Harbor. British naval officers were waiting. U-2511 docked at Bergen Harbor. Schnee ordered his crew to assemble on deck in their dress uniforms, a final salute to military protocol. The British boarding party came aboard, led by a Royal Navy commander. He introduced himself, quickly inspected the submarine, then turned to Schnee. "Type 21, the commander asked. "Yes," Schnee replied. The commander nodded slowly. "We've been reading about these. Intelligence reports said they were operational, but we didn't believe it." "They are operational," Schnee confirmed. The commander walked the length of the submarine, studying the streamlined hull, recessed fittings, and the minimal conning tower. He stopped at the torpedo loading hatch. "How many torpedoes?" he asked. 23, Schnee replied. 6 loaded, 17 in reserve, with a hydraulic reload system. It takes 12 minutes to reload all tubes. The commander's expression shifted. 12 minutes? Our submarines take 25 minutes, manually loaded. Schnee said nothing. The commander continued his inspection, looking at the battery compartments, electric motors, and sonar-absorbing rubber coating. Finally, he returned to Schnee. "When did this become operational?" he asked. "April 30th, Schnee answered. "First patrol, May 1st. The commander paused for a moment, then remarked, 8 days. You had 8 days of war left." "Yes," Schnee said. The commander looked at the submarine again, at the technology that had arrived too late, and then slowly spoke. "If you had had 350 of these in 1943, he said, we'd have lost the Atlantic." Schnee didn't reply because a commander was right. The British took U-2511 to Lisa, Northern Ireland, for detailed technical examination. Teams of naval architects, engineers, and submarine designers spent 6 months studying every system. What they discovered revolutionized post-war submarine design. The streamlined hull became standard, as did the high-capacity battery system, hydraulic torpedo loading, and the snorkel system. Every major submarine navy, British, American, Soviet, copied the Type 21's innovations. However, the British examination also revealed something else, the 2-year delay that cost Germany the war. The Type 21 was designed in February 1943. If Germany had maintained its 1941 industrial capacity, the first submarine would have been operational by October 1943, and full production, 350 submarines, would have been completed by mid-1944. That timeline could have changed everything. By October 1943, the first 50 Type 21 submarines were deployed to the North Atlantic. Operating in wolf packs, they would attack submerged at 17 knots, unlike the Type 7, which was much slower. Allied escorts would detect nothing, with sonar returns showing only empty ocean. Then the torpedoes would strike from 800 meters. By the time the destroyers arrived, the Type 21 submarines would have already dived to 280 meters and escaped at speed. Allied merchant losses would rise to 400,000 tons per month, matching the worst months of 1942. The convoy system would barely hold. Every tanker sunk would mean less fuel for the Allied buildup in Britain. Every transport sunk would mean fewer tanks, fewer trucks, fewer supplies for the invasion force. D-Day might be delayed until September or October 1944, 3 or 4 months later. During that time, Germany could fortify the Atlantic Wall, deploy more jet fighters, and move additional divisions into France. Would Germany win? No. America's industrial capacity, able to produce 2,700 Liberty ships in 4 years, 300,000 aircraft, and 88,000 tanks, would eventually overwhelm any technological advantage. The Type 21 was revolutionary, but not magical. Allied engineers would adapt. They would develop countermeasures, deeper depth charges, more sensitive sonar, faster destroyers. Allied industry would produce more escorts, more aircraft, and more depth charges. But the war would last longer. Instead of ending in May 1945, it could drag on into late 1945 or even early 1946. Casualties would rise on all sides. Destruction would spread. The atomic bomb, originally developed to target Germany, might fall on Berlin instead of Hiroshima, all because of timing. Because Germany built the Type 21 2 years too late. The British examination calculated the exact production gap, from a design completion in February 1943 to the first operational submarine in April 1945, a delay of 26 months. These delays were systematic. Allied bombing had reduced shipyard capacity by 40%, and raw material shortages, copper, rubber, steel, added 6 months to the timeline. Transportation disruptions, destroyed railways, and bombed bridges prevented modular sections from reaching assembly yards. Skilled worker shortages due to conscription of shipyard workers into the Wehrmacht led to quality control failures that required extensive rework. Each delay compounded. A submarine section delayed by 3 weeks at the factory meant a 3-week delay at the shipyard. A quality control failure requiring 2 weeks of rework meant 2 weeks less for crew training. Training delays meant submarines sat completed but unmanned. The cumulative effect was devastating. 118 Type 21 submarines built, but only 4 operational before the surrender. Had Germany maintained its 1941 production capacity, with no bombings, no material shortages, and no worker shortages, the timeline would have been radically different. The first submarine would have been operational by October 1943, with 350 Type 21s in service by June 1944. That 14-month gap, October 1943 to December 1944, was a critical window when the Type 21 could have changed the war. After December 1944, Allied anti-submarine capabilities advanced too far. Deeper depth charges, improved sonar, and escort carriers with air support would have minimized the Type 21's advantages.